Welcome to today's lesson. I'm going to talk about conversations between the DHCP server and the client. In the last lesson, we discussed how DHCP works, and today we want to see how the server converses with the client. To understand this, we have to note that every operating system comes with a DHCP client. Be it Android for the phones, or Windows, or Linux operating system, every single user operating system comes with a DHCP client. And therefore, conversation between the DHCP server and the DHCP client is initiated by the DHCP client. In a local area network, you may have one or more DHCP servers depending on the size of the local area network that you have. Assuming you have two servers in the local area network, so you have server B and you have server A, and you have a client. That means you have a user with a computer, a laptop or a computer or a phone who is using your local area network. When the client is connected to the local area network, the client will always broadcast messages. In fact, after every few number of seconds, the client always broadcasts messages. That's a DHCP client. Trying to know whether there is a DHCP server around. So it broadcasts what we call DHCP discover message. So it sends to everyone in the LAN. So DHCP discover message. All the servers in the local area network will receive that message. The servers will respond to this message with DHCP offer. This one will also respond with DHCP offer message. This DHCP offer message has the parameters that this server intends to lease out to this client. This other message, DHCP server offer message from server A, has different parameters that server A intends to lease out to the client. And remember last time we said that the parameters that the DHCP server leases out to the client computers includes the IP address, subnet mask, number 3, IP address of the gateway, and number 4, IP address of the DNS server. These are the 4 parameters that every client will require for it to connect to the network. And therefore, when you are configuring the DHCP server, you give these details. And we said that these details are going to be stored in the pool, in the address pool database of the DHCP server. And therefore, these parameters are different from different servers. The client will choose the best parameters that it requires, whether from this server or from this server. And it will depend on a number of factors. For example, maybe which one came first. So assuming it uses this one that it gets fast from server B. So it will now request, it will now send what we call DHCP request message. This DHCP request message is broadcasted DHCP request. But the catch is this DHCP request message has the parameters from server B. And therefore, server A doesn't have the parameters that client is requesting. And therefore, it is only this server that will acknowledge the request because it has the parameters that this server, this client is requesting. So the server B will respond with DHCP acknowledged. DHCP acknowledged. That means that you can now be able to use these parameters. It is allowing this client to use the parameters that it has. So the list time now begins. The initialization begins. This client can now be able to be connected to the network and to the internet. So initialization begins. Once the client no longer requires these parameters, it can send back the parameters using the message DHCP release. DHCP release. That means I no longer need these parameters. They are taken back to the address pool. When these parameters are being used, they are actually in the binding database of the server. So once the client no longer needs the parameters, it can release. When does this take place? For example, when your computer goes to sleep, maybe you just close your computer, you shut down your computer, the DHCP client will release those parameters so that the server can be able to lease those parameters to another client computer. Now, in case that the time of lease ends and the client still requires the same parameters, it can be able to issue the message DHCP renew. That means that the time of lease has ended, but I still need these parameters because I'm still connected to the network. This renew happens without the knowledge of the user. The user will not even understand because it takes a very short time. And in case the client, for some reasons, decides that it doesn't need these parameters that it had initially requested, then it can be able to send the message DHCP decline. That means I no longer need these parameters. Maybe the admin has allocated static IP address. Then this computer or the client will send DHCP decline that I no longer need these parameters. So these are the messages or conversation between the client and the server. It is important to note that the list time is done during the configuration, so you configure the time that the client will always be given those parameters. The longer the period, the better. But again, if your IPs are few and therefore you need to really be efficient in terms of the uses of the IP addresses, you can make it a bit shorter. And therefore, that is how the client and the server, the DHCP server, converse. Thank you very much for watching.